Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Okay, welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. A historic piece of legislation was created in British Columbia, and that what makes this piece of legislation so important that it affects First Nations and it generally recognizes the rights to the land that the First Nations should have. So, just a little piece from the a news article from the BC government, historic piece of legislation that recognizes the Haida Nation's Aboriginal title throughout the Haida Gwaii, and the first to recognize Aboriginal title in Canadian history was introduced to the BC Legislative Assembly on Monday, April 22nd, 2024. The introduction confirms the historic Haida Gwaii Rising Tide Haida Title Land Agreement, a first of its kind negotiated between Haida Nation and British Columbia. The new legislation, the Haida Nation Recognition Amendment Act 2024, recognizes the Haida's Aboriginal title throughout the Haida Gwaii. The legislation also supports an agreement and implementation approach which provides for a staged transition to Haida jurisdiction while protecting and maintaining private property rights and existing government services and infrastructure on Haida Gwaii. So, why don't we listen to what actually happened on the BC Assembly floor as this was introduced, and we're going to hear a speech from the Haida Nation Gaagwiis, Jason Alsop, who was part of the delegation of the Haida Nation citizens when this all was presented in the BC Legislative Chamber, and it will give a speech about what rising tides means for everyone in British Columbia and what it could mean if this is mimicked across Canada. So why don't we go to that now, and we'll come back for our final thoughts.
Thank you. Please be seated. Members, I invite Elder Mary Ann Thomas of the Squamish Nation to offer a territorial welcome.
RCMs and Salello, chiefs, elders, Nano Helok Tanamana. I really welcome each and every one of you to Skobetis in Lukomen, Songhees and Esquimalt Nation. We really lift our hands up to you to be coming to the home here. And it's an honor to have all the Haidas. We really welcome you home here. That we're all here to walk together. We all face things together. But we use our snow oil, our teachings to walk together, help one another, forgive one another. Because life is really precious. It's you and I that's the role model for our children, to our youth. I know there's a lot of heavy hearts, but you know, we'll have all you in prayer when our sister opens up with a prayer, but I just really wanted to welcome each and every one of you to Songhees and Esquimalt territory. We're just really grateful for today, especially to be with the Haidas and our friends, to really welcome all the elders, to welcome all the children. Because the children is the ones that make the grandmas so happy, exciting, because they are so precious. Those are our little flowers, and we're teaching them. Because today we're really so lucky to have our children, grandchildren, to let all the elders know I love you. I really thank you for your life that you give to the people.
Thank you, Elder Mary Ann Thomas, for your territorial recognition, and thank you for letting us be on this land. Thank you so much. Now I would invite Elder Dan Brown and Elder Leona Clow of the Haida Nation to provide a blessing.
Salana gunamit khairas. Adit kunisi. Ahayetu. Dan makan ginatla gasto di. Hotel senutu aske nagai it alang khadi. It kakhangi la and alang isis. Bukan asi nagai ka an kangulka ugan nagai uiji hotel senuto khairas kill uadluhan ik gila giustagan it kunisi wadluhan asi at gudang la ang wadluhan kandang ni Gino Haida Gwaii hangay lagan Hawaii to dan kanut tikyong kanut ang Haida Gwaii hangay lahiri kakwan it kill godangan asiarit godangay iwan it kunisi dalangu kay kagino an dalang gyakang di sa Gaagwiis dalang iskit si dagwigan gay kagano and ang walakan iji it kunisi dalang iskit si dagwigan dan was kanost I hatsiga it soka isken kuskakit walakan dagan dalang iskit si dagwigan it kunisi you it keep wadluchan gina wadluchan aslogan Haida kill Haida skalangay Haida gias kalangay Haida skatagay gina wadluchan it gidat aslogan dan dalang wadluchan dalang danga kill la Mugin askay khayrigan na dagasti gayasin kit alang kilwa kutstoga. Asi wadluhan nangat alang kilwa sa lanagunang it khayras adit kunisi hawa dalang wadluhan hawa.
Salana sanang itlagdas at lang de lang kangan de las sang dat il kilagan a stegen lagelti a godangsti is hansen lagelti du itla a sang sading al kilagan amen how
On behalf of all the members, I really want to sincerely say thank you for your blessings at the onset of our proceedings today. Thank you so much. Please be seated. Again, a very warm welcome on behalf of all members to the many guests gathered on the chamber floor and in the gallery to witness proceedings today. So members, we will have some introduction. The rest of the introduction we will do just before the 2-minute statements. And I also would like to gently remind members no cameras will be used on the floor to take any pictures or record the proceedings. We have a designated photographer and videographer upstairs. They will be recording for you if you need a copy. Thank you. Introductions. Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Today is truly an historic day. I'm honored to be joined by many guests, particularly from Haida Gwaii, who've joined us, and I want to salute their tireless dedication that brought us to this place. First, I want to thank Esquimalt Elder. Thank you very much, Mary Ann Thomas, for starting us off in a good way. And with the land acknowledgement, I too would like to acknowledge that we're on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees, and the Esquimalt nations. I have a few thank yous, Mr. Speaker, if you'll bear with me, and forgive me for my mispronunciation of some of the names. I'd first like to say to thank the Haida elders who led us in prayer. I'd like to first acknowledge Oolong Hathaway, Leona Clow, and Gwaganad Diane Brown. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, we're in the company of so many members of the Haida Nation. I'd like to welcome first and foremost the President of the Council of the Haida Nation, Gaagwiis. Also on the floor today, I'd like to recognize the hereditary leaders. I'd like to start by recognizing Idansu, Jim Hart, Ganya, Rodney Sheck, Gatai, Lonnie Young, Git Kuhn, Reg Young, and Najing Was, Russ Jones, and finally Stithda, Frank Collison. We also have a few elected representatives of the Council of the Haida Nation with us today, starting with Lanas, Tamara Davidson, Kuwas Wuath Gidak, Lisa Hageman, Kella Gajad, Tara Samuels, Hayal Yahgudang Wiya, Desi Collinson, Gaagwiis, Bill White, Yahgudáng, Tasha Samuels, and Gumkai Young Slung, Donald Edgars. With us are two former presidents of the Council of the Haida Nation, Mr. Speaker, Kilslai Ka Ji Tlung, Miles Richardson, and Kilklatska, Peter Lanton. Haida Cultural Support, we have with us Gidath Goodsley, Terry Lynn Williams Davidson, Jis Sung, Nika Collinson, Tidal, Cohen Isberg, and finally Gaju Hial, Donnie Edenshaw. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to particularly draw attention to the presence in the House of the Federal Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, the Honourable Gary Ananda Sangari, and thank him so much for joining us. In the gallery, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to welcome to the House the many Indigenous leaders from across British Columbia and community members who have joined us today from Haida Gwaii. Amongst them is Robert Phillips and Cheryl Casimir of the First Nations Summit, Heltsitchik Marilyn Slett, Kasalem of the Squamish Nation, Roshan Dinesh, Jody Wilson-Raybo, Dr. David Suzuki. I'd also like to specifically reference three of the legal advisors who've worked so hard for so many years with the Council of the Haida Nation to get us to this day. Professor Michael Jackson, Louise Mandel, and David Patterson are also with us. And finally, if you'll permit me, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge my spouse, Linda Hanna, accompanied by Leslie, Hannah, and Barry Lassiter, who are with us today. I'd like, Mr. Speaker, for us to make them feel very welcome.
Member for North Coast.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think I said this not too long ago that I've never had so many constituents in the House at the same time as I did just not too long ago. However, this kind of takes the cake. And I'm really, thank you, Minister, for doing all those introductions, because my notes started, I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up. And you covered so many people here, and of course we can't recognize everyone, but I so want to. I also just want to, I want to acknowledge our opening from Marianne Thomas, and I also want to acknowledge I want to acknowledge Ulang Hathaway, Leona Clow, please forgive me, Leona, I talk to you all the time, I'm just so freaking nervous up here, and Gwaganad Diane Brown, for opening us up with a good prayer in a good way. And just to take this opportunity, people will often talk about the Haida language, and in fact, there's more than two actually, but there are two on Haida Gwaii, the archipelago of islands itself, and that is the dialect of Old Masset and the dialect of Skidegate. And so today we were welcomed in both dialects, and I have never in a million years thought I would hear, besides the word hawa, in the house. I'm shaking and shivering that that we had so much Haida language that is forever entrenched in this house in the Hansard. It is a record that will never ever go away, and that is really special. And so I'm just happy to be here. And I'm sorry, Hansard, I don't know how you are going to translate that, but we'll help you. We have some great language speakers here. So I am just honored to be joined by so many special guests, many of which are from my riding, the riding of North Coast, which will soon be renamed the riding of North Coast Haida Gwaii, because Haida Gwaii, for Haida people, they are not on the coast. They are unto themselves in the archipelago, and so to lump them in with coastal First Nations is, it's just not acknowledging the reality, even though the relationships with coastal First Nations is very strong with Haida. I will get to the point. Mr. Speaker, in the building today are we have the Indigenous youth interns here, and three of which are from the Haida Nation. So we have Vanessa Parnell, Nikila Gladstone, and Logan West from the youth internship program. Also joining us today, Mr. Speaker, are representatives from local government, businesses, and community members on Haida Gwaii, as well as many urban Haida from Vancouver, Victoria, and across the province. So I would like to acknowledge the local governments and the businesses that are here today. We have Sherry Disney, who is the mayor of Masset. We have Roland Dene, who's the vice chair of the School District 52 School Board. Denoy, I'm so sorry, Roland, here I go. Lisa Pinot, the mayor of Dodging Guides. We have Barry Pages, who is the chair of the North Coast Regional District. Joanne Young, she's the Area D director for the North Coast Regional District. And some of our major businesses, we have John Mohammed from A&A Trading, John McCullough from Langara Fishing Lodge, Heather Carnahan from the Queen Charlotte Lodge. And I just want to say I'm so grateful to all of you for traveling here to show your support for this historic legislation. And would my colleagues, would this House please make everyone feel welcome? Thank you.
Member for Skeena.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Haidas are in the House, and I have a long history with the Haidas, mainly from the all-native basketball tournament in Prince Rupert. And some of the old-timers are sitting in the audience today. Even some of the young people are sitting in the audience. Right? I have war stories, but not pre-contact, on the basketball court. And the Haidas know what I mean about that, right? Also, my brother married into the Masset First Nation, Yovanoviches, and I'm pretty sure Billy Yovanovich is in the gallery as well. I hope so anyway. He's not waving. But if he is, say hi to Billy. He's a good friend of mine, longtime friend. But it's quite the occasion today, Aboriginal Rights and Title. And I've been talking about Aboriginal Rights and Title in this place for 7 years. trying to get people to understand the basics of it. Now, my band is the Haida First Nation, and we're the home of LNG, we're the home of forestry, mining, but none of that was possible for my people to be successful without the Haida court case of 2004. That opened up the door to everything for us, mainly for our people getting out of poverty. Mind you, the Haida First Nation, we intervened in that court case. We were there with you. Our lawyers were actually collaborating with Haida lawyers to try to figure out what is the best way to get government to act honorably. That case law still exists today. Questionable whether or not the government's followed it or not, but very significant in terms of our shared history. And the last person I'd like to introduce, and welcome to the legislature, Miles Richardson. Good to see you again. All right, would the callers please welcome the Haida and all my friends, including the basketball poles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Saanich North and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, this is yet another powerful day in this legislature. We've been honored to participate in and be a part of. Just want to acknowledge all of the hereditary chiefs that are in the room with us here today. Just want to acknowledge Elder Marianne Thomas. It's wonderful to see you again, HKCM, for your beautiful and powerful words. Ulang Hathaway, Leona Clow, thank you. Gaagwiis, thank you very much for the beautiful opening prayer that sets us off here in a good way today. Gaagwiis, welcome back to this house for yet another historic day, and it is remarkable that we sit here and stand here together in this place to celebrate a step forward, not just for British Columbia, but for all of this beautiful country that we live in. I just want to raise my hands and acknowledge Takin Jad, who's a very powerful Haida voice within the BC Green Caucus, and we're very thankful that Rose Williams is with us and is able to be here today to celebrate this day. And I just want to end with this, Mr. Speaker. There are the politicians in the room that make days like this happen. There are the politicians in First Nations communities that have been asking for Crown governments to take these steps forward in recognition rather than the approach that has been taken in the past to recognize and acknowledge Aboriginal rights and Indigenous title. And then there are the people that work in our staff and work in the government. And I just want to raise my hands. I just want to raise my hands to all the Hwunguk people that have been working within this government, within the ministry. I want you to know that you've been seen and that your work has been done, and all the folks that have been working alongside you to move this along, the First Nations Leadership Council that have been helping move this along. I just want you to know that the work that you have done to get us to where we're at today is really meaningful, and the First Nations people that are working within government are making a lot of this happen, and so I just want to acknowledge them, and could the House please make everybody feel very welcome here. Haida Gwaii.
Minister of Forests.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good fortune has brought us another esteemed guest on this auspicious occasion here in the legislature. Today in the gallery we are joined by Her Excellency Ezra Demir, who is the Ambassador of Turkey to Canada, on her first visit to British Columbia. Would the House please make her feel very welcome?
Madam Clerk.
Introduction of bills.
Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to transmit a message from Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor.
Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor transmits here with Bill number 25, entitled Haida Nation Recognition Amendment Act 2024, and recommends the same to the Legislative Assembly. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be introduced and read a first time now. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to introduce Bill 25, the Haida Nation Recognition Amendment Act 2024, for first reading. This historic legislation amends the Haida Nation Recognition Act to recognize the Haida Nation's Aboriginal title to Haida Gwaii. to be protected under Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982, and in accordance with the bilateral Haida Title Lands Agreement between the Province of British Columbia and the Haida Nation. Mr. Speaker, Haida Aboriginal title to Haida Gwaii is clear. It is past time for the province to recognize that indisputable fact. A little over a week ago, it was my honor to join the Premier, Gaagwiis, and many people here today to sign the Haida Title Lands Agreement. Mr. Speaker, Haida citizens have worked so long and so hard to see their title to Haida Gwaii formally recognized. People who live on those beautiful islands know that this is the best path forward together. It secures a bright future for Haida Gwaii. It provides stability for all islanders with an orderly and incremental path to implement Haida Aboriginal title. The Haida Title Lands Agreement also creates space for the federal government to be included in the future, and my understanding is that they intend to do just that. This year, my federal counterpart, the Honourable Gary Ananda Sangari, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, introduced legislation in Parliament to affirm the Government of Canada's recognition of the Haida Nation as the holder of the inherent rights of governance and self-determination. Now, the legislation before this House is the next step needed to implement the Haida Title Lands Agreement into provincial law. It is the next step needed to advance in reconciliation between the province and the Haida Nation and to secure that bright future for everyone who lives on Haida Gwaii. For this reason, Mr. Speaker, it is my great honor to rise in this House today and move this motion.
Members, the question is, first reading of the bill. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be placed on the orders of the day for second reading at the next sitting of the House after today.
You have heard the question. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Thank you, Elder Thomas, for the welcome to the territory. Thank you, Haida elders, for starting us off in such a good way. This is a very historic day for this legislature building, and I want to thank all of our special guests who made the effort to travel here to join us today. I would like to say, just as the person who has the opportunity to hold the office of Premier at this moment of recognition, this is the honor of my career. I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. So I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be a part of this work that started many, many, many years ago and involved many, many, many people. I was with Minister Rankin in Skidegate at the community hall last week, witnessing the work that the Haida have done and witnessing the signing of the Rising Tide Agreement that the provincial government has entered into with the Haida. It's a remarkable place. For those of you who haven't been there, it was my first time. Everybody was very welcoming. And as the member for Skeena has noted, it's a hall where basketball prowess is recognized as much as the remarkable Haida culture. There were elders, hereditary chiefs, parents and kids, all generations, and there were remarkable speeches, Mr. Speaker, about what the Haida perspective has been on this question of title for generations. From the earliest moments of contact all the way through to the signing of the agreement. It was a very moving day. It was a very important day. One of the pieces that stays with me is how important the connection is between the Haida and the land. That the Haida Constitution talks explicitly about how important the land is to the Haida as a people. And that was very obvious when I visited the museum. Museum doesn't feel like the right word because Haida culture has been in Haida Gwaii from time immemorial, Mr. Speaker. But I saw hunting remains from 10,000 years ago that were discovered next to artifacts of the Haida people. And to be a representative of a government dating from about 150 years ago, talking to a government of a people that have been in Haida Gwaii since time immemorial, really put things in perspective for me. Recognizing the title of the Haida people, and that's recognizing the title. It was always there. The Haida people to their land, the connection of the people of the land is important work for our government to do, and it is just the beginning of the partnership that we are undertaking with the Haida people to move forward in a different way. No more battles in court, sitting around the table, focused on how we are going to work together, recognizing Haida government, Haida title, and our shared path forward that is now intertwined. This agreement will raise all boats. It will improve the lives of the Haida people. It will improve the lives of everybody on Haida Gwaii. It will improve the prosperity of our entire province, and it is an international example of how we can get things done and how we can move forward differently. I know that this will be an inspiration to Indigenous people around the world. I'd like to thank a couple of people. I'd like to thank, obviously, the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, who 45 years ago wrote a paper on Haida title. Now, for those of us that are 47, that feels like a long time ago. I want to thank him and his team, Becky Black, Tom McCarthy, that were instrumental in delivering this. In my office, Doug Call, who was the Deputy Minister in Indigenous Relations, who's worked under many governments with the Haida, coming to this day. The member for North Coast and Haida Gwaii, for her advocacy on this important issue and her representation of her constituents. And I'd like to also thank Doug White III, Quaselton, legal counsel in my office, special advisor, for his assistance in ensuring that we were able to arrive here today. And finally, I wanted to thank all members of this House for joining us in this historic work, and Mr. Speaker, for your work to make everybody feel welcome today in their House, Legislative Assembly of British Columbia, as we do this important work together.
Member for Vancouver Langara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I join yourself and the Minister responsible for Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, the Premier, in welcoming all of the guests here to this Assembly here today. And Mr. Speaker, you have created that space in the work that you've done on the Legislative Precinct, recognizing the Lekwungen peoples and ceremonies that we participated on some months ago. I will take this opportunity to join the basketball theme by invitation by my colleague, the member from Skeena. And I know to Gaagwiis, we stood here a year ago with many of you here, elders, other leaders for the Haida Nation, to mark another occasion. But you and I talked about the fact that for 2 years, you have been a student at Langara College in my constituency of Vancouver-Langara. And more importantly today, this morning, you shared with me that you were a power forward on the Langara Falcons, the pride of Langara College, the basketball team. Clearly, Gaagwiis, you've demonstrated a lot of strength and power on behalf of your nation, like so many others have. Miles Richardson was acknowledged. Gujal, I would say, and so many other leaders of the nation. I know that I spoke a year ago about the journey for the Haida Nation. Whether it's from time immemorial, which it certainly has been, or even over the last 20 years since that Haida court decision in 2004. It's been a long journey. And for today, for many of you, all of you who've traveled so far to be here, to witness the introduction of this bill, as we just did. We know for your ancestors, your elders, your family members, your grandparents, this is another important day. Another phrase that this government has said over successive governments over the last 20 years. When you look at the language of the documents, the words incremental step are used. I know that the agreement that forms part of this bill states very clearly that this is not a treaty. This is another step towards reconciliation with the Haida Nation. These are very important steps. And that a year ago, as we recognized this very act that is now being amended, the Haida Nation Recognition Act, that is another very important step. There was recognition a year ago, and certainly in our review of the bill. The former minister's efforts, the member from Shuswap, George Abbott, under a former BC Liberal government, in that Haida Gwaii Reconciliation Act that was introduced in 2010. It was representing the development of a new relationship with the Haida Nation, the province of British Columbia. Mr. Speaker, I only cite that to recognize that there's been a significant amount of efforts by successive governments to build that new relationship with the Haida Nation. And even in this act, the use of the term incremental step is referred to. I know for all of you who are gathered here today that, as Gaagwiis just reminded me, the Haida Nation and the Haida peoples aren't going anywhere. This is a journey of reconciliation. And I, on behalf of the Leader of Official Opposition, who was a member of that cabinet when that 2010 Act was first brought forward, he certainly understands the importance of reconciliation with the Haida Nation. I know, as I was reflecting on my comments today, as I was saying to Councillor Tamara in the hallway, I thought, is it possible that I was asked to make comments on behalf of the official opposition on first reading on the Haida Nation Recognition Act? And she reminded me, as I know now, it was actually on third reading. For those of you who understand what I'm saying, is it just makes it a little more different in terms of how we do our process here in this House. It's with utmost respect to the Haida Nation that I provide the rest of my remarks, recognizing that this is a historic occasion, recognizing that there is much work to do, recognizing that it's been a long journey to get to this stage. But I know, as the Leader of the Official Opposition has asked me to do so, we need to do this in a clear and transparent way. And that is, as the leaders of the Haida Nation will recognize, the reason why the Leader of the Official Opposition and myself had put out a statement back in March 22nd to call for a pause on this proceeding. Because what we understood in the draft news release that the minister had put out was a consideration in the framework. That we need to understand this framework, this legislative framework that is coming forward, that I just received a copy of just now, before I stood up to speak. I have not obviously had a chance to read through it in detail. I will say that the Haida Nation in my 2 years as the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation is the only nation that ever actually came to meet with me in my office. I've tried to use my time to reach out to First Nations chief and councils and other First Nation leadership organizations around the province, but I appreciate that Gujal, Councillor Tamara, and their advisor, Gary Wooters, came and met with me in my office after that news release of the draft agreement came out. It was important to have an understanding as to the nature of the agreement, even though the agreement had not yet come out. The agreement is now available, certainly, and there are considerations around that. The Premier has referred to this in his comments here in this House and in the public about how this may well represent a new model. It's not a treaty. Clearly, that's what it says in the agreement. It's more than just an agreement. I think it's more than an incremental step, which may be a good thing, of course, because it's already taken 20 years to get to this stage, at least in terms of the Haida decision. But I hope that the leaders of the Haida Nation will recognize that, at least for other members of this House on the opposition side, at least for the official opposition, that we haven't had the opportunity to fully review and consider the bill that was just introduced, that there are some questions that have been raised, including our initial statement, that I hope to have the opportunity to meet with representatives of the Council of Haida Nation again, and I know that that was just offered in the hallway. I welcome that opportunity to have that further discussion. And that the Haida Nation recognizes that that decision in 2004, as much as we do recognize, as was called in Delngamuk, that we need to do our reconciliation with nations in our province by way of agreement and negotiation, not through the courts. And this agreement has been a pathway towards not having to go forward, at least with the province of British Columbia in 2026. We still have the federal process to unfold. But in respect of that Haida decision, that we certainly acknowledge the court's recognition of the strength of the Haida Nation and the Haida people's claim on title on Haida Gwaii. This is the reason why I understand that government has come forward with this agreement. We also recognize that that Haida decision speaks to the importance, apart from the duty to consult and accommodate, as that decision is known for, but also the importance of ensuring that balance and compromise are part of the notion of reconciliation, and that the Crown, this government, has a duty to balance those interests. Our role in the official opposition is to ensure that they're doing that. This is where it comes from. So I speak to you in this way, because you are all here gathered today on this occasion. I congratulate the Haida Nation for reaching this stage, but I hope you'll appreciate the role that we need to continue to play in the next stages of this review of this bill. So I look forward to that continuing dialogue, hopefully to get the clarity that is necessary in the time that is needed to get that clarity, so that all British Columbians can feel like they're being brought along in this pathway towards reconciliation, recognizing that this agreement, this legislation, is being held up by this government as a future path for other nations. This is the reason why, all the more reason why, in the dying weeks of this Legislative Assembly, this session, we need to ensure we have the time generally speaking, to address this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Hadalasis, good people. I am grateful for the honour to speak on behalf of the Green Caucus on this momentous and historic day. And I want to start by acknowledging all of the leaders who got us here, the Haida leaders, the Indigenous leaders who are gathered here, the non-Indigenous leaders, the leaders in government, and as was acknowledged by my colleague, the leaders in staff. It has taken an enormous amount of leadership to get us to this day, to this moment, and this is the way of people working together. We're gathered on the lands of the Lekwungen peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. The Haida Nation has a long history with the people of these lands. Temporary village sites were filled with Haida as trading took place. The intricate networks of communities along the coast of what we now call British Columbia, Washington, and Alaska were rich with the exchange of language, foods, art, and songs. The connections these coastal nations have to the lands, waters, and their neighbors are inspiring. I think of a Haida phrase often shared with me by my colleague Rose Williams. All these things are related, and we need each other to survive. The Council of the Haida Nation was formed by the Haida community in 1974 in response to the growing need to protect their lands and waters from degradation and exploitation. The CHN is governed by elected representatives, hereditary chiefs, and matriarchs, and is informed by traditional Haida law. By passing the Haida Nation Recognition Act, the BC government officially recognized the CHN as the government of the Haida Nation. During the passage of the bill last year, the legislature felt, as it does today, notably different. The drumming, the singing, the beautiful regalia, Haida elders, young children made what can feel like the cold marble walls of this place as a room that bounces and is filled with life. As I stood alongside my colleague, the MLA for Saanich North and the Islands, during the passage of the bill, the joy and pride in the House was palpable. And today I feel the same feeling of hope and pride. Haida title has always existed. The Haida have and will continue to be the rightful heirs to Haida Gwaii. Accompanied with title comes the responsibility to uphold Haida laws and values. The first paragraph in the Haida Nation Constitution, translated in both Haida Kil and Hudkil, reads as follows, quote, "The Haida Nation is the rightful heir to Haida Gwaii. Our culture is born of respect and intimacy with the land and sea and air around us. Like the forests, the roots of our people are intertwined such that the greatest troubles cannot overcome us. We owe our existence to Haida Gwaii. The living generation accepts the responsibility to ensure that our heritage is passed on to following generations. On these islands, our ancestors lived and died, and here too we will make our homes until called away to join them in the great beyond." I'm going to share some of my colleagues' words. Rose Williams, O Takinjad. "We are a nation of fighters and survivors. I am the first generation in my family to not attend residential school. If it were up to the state, I would not be here at all. And neither would any one of us Haida, yet we have survived. Guided by the voices of our ancestors and propelled by our responsibility to protect the lands, waters, and all living things on Haida Gwaii, we have not only survived, but thrived. I reflect on our resilience and resistance, which has carved the space for us to be here today. The standoff at Lyle Island has become famous around the world. Haida stood strong at the foot of old-growth logging on Haida Gwaii, standing up for Haida law and rights. My relatives were arrested at Haida Gwaii, and more have been arrested at countless standoffs between extractive industries and the protectors of the land. We know that moving forward to ensure our great-grandchildren can flourish, we must operate differently. Extraction with no end and financial wealth with no cap will starve this world of all the beauty and choke our future on this earth. Now, more than ever, we must find a way to live in concert with the lands, waters, and air that we depend on. Everything depends on everything else, and we must find a way to harmonize our ways of being with a future of abundance and yahgudáng, respect for all living things. This legislation is significant. When I finally read the Haida title and lands agreement in its entirety at the end of March, my eyes found it difficult to focus, as my vision was blurred with tears. We have fought for so long to exercise our sovereignty, our rights, and our place on Haida Gwaii. It is an honor to witness this, finally, Haida title. I have so much gratitude for my nation and the great work that has been done to get here. I celebrate the work of this province in recognizing the vital role we have in governance and stewardship. We will continue to uphold Haida law and fight to protect the lands and waters which make us Haida. Thank you, Rose, for sharing your words today and your wisdom with us all days. We are so blessed to have Rose as a colleague. You are a leader in our caucus and in this legislature and in this world that needs leadership rooted in what is real: land, family, community, culture, connection, and vision. This legislation shows what is possible in this province and in this country. The work and dedication of the Haida Nation shows that we can shape an entirely new tapestry of governance in this province. They have already inspired countless nations and communities across the country and around the world. We celebrate the province for bringing this legislation forward, and most importantly, we celebrate and honor the hard work and dedication of the Haida Nation. They have stewarded their lands and waters for millennia and have fought for their inherent rights to continue to do so in the future. We look forward to seeing the next steps. Hawa.
Leader of the Fourth Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am honored today to share a few words as well. And I want to start by saying congratulations. The path has been a long journey for the Haida people, and you've set a very important milestone for First Nations across the province, as you have historically as well. For me, the path to reconciliation is of utmost importance for all British Columbians, not just from government to government, but a true reconciliation from people to people, a reconciliation that can find that new path going forward. For me, reconciliation is about recognition. Recognition of our past, recognition, of course, of the present, but recognition of the future and what that future needs to be shaped. And I think it might come surprising to some people to know that I support title. We need to discover title. I remember standing up one day, I was the First Nation in my riding, the Sycus First Nation, and I talked about recognizing title, and there was a pause and a hush. And one of the leaders asked, whether this was some, divine intervention, some sort of recognition that came about. And I said, no, this is a path that needs to be done. This is a path that we need to do to be able to bring predictability, certainty for Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike. It is what has to happen in this province. And economic reconciliation. In the words of Joseph Gosnell, it's long past time the First Nations have been held back, and that they have an opportunity to not only catch up, but potentially surpass economically. Because without economic reconciliation, there can be no reconciliation. Without economic reconciliation, there can be no advancing from poverty. The vision of being able to provide for your children and your grandchildren, for them to be able to have the future that you want for them, is something I think that we all share. All peoples in this province share. And when I thought about sharing words here today with regards to this important step, this historic step, I remember when I was minister back in 2016, and there was the court case that was coming forward from Haida to claim title over the islands, over Haida Gwaii. And I went at that time, and I went into the Attorney General's office, and I talked to the staff, and I said, what are we going to do about this case coming forward? And they reassured me. They said, we have a very strong case. We're going to win this case in court. And I looked at them, quite frankly, and I said, you guys crazy? Like, the Haida people have defended the Haida Gwaii Islands for thousands of years. They fought. They've defended it. How on earth do you expect that we would actually win this in court? And so it was into 2017 in discussions with the Attorney Generals, I said to them, I said, we actually need to put together an offer to recognize title. And I'm glad, of course, that work died after the 2017 election, but I'm glad that this process has gone forward. But there's a few things, of course, that, that have been raised that need to be thought about, and I raised this as part of that process back in those discussions way back then, which is how do we make sure that we address private property rights? How do we make sure that we don't end up creating friction, that we end up being able to have reconciliation? How do we make sure that we address the infrastructure and make sure that it's supported? And what's the role of the province play versus the role of Haida in terms of that component? And it was one of the flaws, quite frankly, in the Silcotin case, where private land was excluded, but infrastructure was included in title, and it's now created friction and actually being very detrimental to private property rights. And I think about it, and I think that was a mistake that was made, and it's one thing that we have to make sure is not made in terms of how this discussion goes forward. So it's important work that needs to be done going forward as we take these next steps in terms of recognizing title. And back in 2016, I remember in the discussions with the Attorney General's office, it was recognized that about $600 million annually was spent more on Haida Gwaii than was generated in revenue. So how do we make sure that for the Haida people and for all the people living on the islands, that there is this recognition that the revenues, that the support, the services are going to continue as a province? What role should be played in terms of Haida, in terms of how those services are being delivered? How does that partnership develop? And it's an important piece that needs to be thought of and talked about in terms of moving forward and finding this path. But it's a good step. This is an important step, and it is an important step, I think, that we need to be thinking about right across the province as we engage with First Nations, that want to see this title, that want to see the return of land, that want to see them be able to have pride and be able to build their futures. So I support the idea of reconciliation. I support the idea of this bill. There's obviously some questions, some things that need to be worked through, and I think government recognizes that as well. It's going to be some important conversations that go forward. So to the Haida people, to the people here, to the people that have worked for generations for this recognition, once again, congratulations. It is an important step for all of British Columbia. And I look forward, quite frankly, to making sure that as this process goes forward, that the interests of all people in British Columbia is taken into consideration so that true reconciliation can be achieved. Once again, congratulations.
Members, now I invite Gaagwiis Jason Alsop, President of the Council of Haida Nation, to address the House.
Koljatganga, Kilslaganga, Haida Loss, good people, members of the Legislative Assembly, Mr. Speaker, special guests, our Haida delegation, other Indigenous leaders who've joined us, and all the people of BC. It is an honor to be in the House today to speak to this work in the recognition of Haida title. I'd also like to say hawa to our acknowledge Elder Marianne Thomas for the beautiful opening and the welcome to carry out our business on the territory of the Songhees, the Esquimalt, the Lekwungen-speaking people. It's an honor to be here, to be part of this, making history here today. I don't want to get dragged into basketball talk, but I seen member Ross play as a fierce point guard, but I think the Premier could swat a few of his shots. I also want to just say hawa to our singers and our elders for opening us in a good way and bringing our ancestors, our Kunisi, into the house with us for this important work. It feels good in here. The energy is good. I could feel our ancestors, our Kunisi, with us, as many have mentioned, many who spent time in this area, many who perished during the smallpox epidemics, and many of those who came before us have been part of this journey of getting to this point. And it is a journey that we're all on together. It's a journey of truth, reconciliation, healing, hope, and renewal for the Haida Nation, for Haida Gwaii, for British Columbia, and for Canada. You know, a lot of ground was already covered here today. Everybody's quite well trained in the history and what led us here today. But I'm here today as the president, elected president of the Haida Nation, with our delegation of hereditary chiefs, elected leaders, past leaders, Haida citizens, allies of the Haida Nation, who've stood with us to encourage you all to support this bill as the leaders of British Columbia in unity as one, to support what is right. And that's what we're here for today. You know, many speakers have already addressed the truth. The truth, you know, is what is the foundation of this work and why we're here. That today and what is to come here is about honoring and recognizing the truth of Haida history and our relationship with Haida Gwaii, our deep and ancient relationship with Haida Gwaii, and the truth about British Columbia and its history with Haida Nation and Haida Gwaii. And this act and this work is an acknowledgement of the past denials and the harms, and fully embracing this truth that we all know Haida Gwaii is Haida land, has always been and will always be. That we had never ceded, surrendered, or in any way given up our title to the land. That our people have asserted our sovereignty against the threats to Haida Gwaii, against colonial occupation, since the very beginning of the Crown trying to assert their sovereignty upon us, to great sacrifice of many who put themselves on the line and risked themselves and their families. So today, after over 150 years of British Columbia trying to impose itself over our lands and people, you know, we stand before you today together committed to a future rooted in Haida history, culture, and values, in upholding our inherent right and responsibility to caretake for Haida Gwaii and all the realms of interconnected existence within Haida culture, the supernatural beings, all the beings of the forest, all the beings of the sea, humans, and that we all are interconnected, we all rely on each other, we all are one. So today is a very important day. It's a historic day because today BC upholds the foundation of Haida law, yahgudáng, respect. And by introducing this provincial legislation, recognizing Haida title to all the land of Haida Gwaii, and all that comes with it is an act of respect, of yahgudáng, of that truth. And the Haida Nation respects our friends and neighbors, the people of Haida Gwaii, who now call Haida Gwaii home, in upholding our commitments to each other, in honoring our protocol agreements to maintain their homes and private property interests, to maintain their communities, and to be part of designing a better and more sustainable future for Haida Gwaii now and for the generations to come. And I want to acknowledge all of our allies and good people who stood with us over the years, as many have mentioned. In the Haida case, the mayor of Port Clement, Dale Orr, stood with us and acknowledged that the future for his community and his people would be better vested in the Haida in looking after their interests. And it was quite a experience as we were sharing about this agreement and the work, visiting all of the communities on Haida Gwaii, overwhelming support from the settlers, the people who call Haida Gwaii home, in recognizing Haida title and standing with us and seeing a better future with recognition of title in all areas of our lives. In our long and ancient history on Haida Gwaii, this dark chapter with BC is an extremely short time in this long history. It was a very damaging time to the land, the resources, the wealth that was taken, that was spoken of, this equation of the wealth leaving Haida Gwaii to come to provincial government coffers, to corporate interest, and that is the work we've committed to going forward, is looking at all of that. How do we work together in designing that future for the betterment of the islands community? So today, we begin creating a new history, a new story in our narrative and our relationship with Haida Gwaii and the people of Haida Gwaii. And we complete a part of the work of our ancestors and past leaders and honor their sacrifices. Many people who've passed on, many people who've given everything over the years, and many people who are still with us that never thought they would live to see this day in their lifetime. So the yahgudáng, the respect, the truth is recognized here today with the crown, and recognizing Haida Gwaii is Haida land. But with this truth also comes bringing hope, in that this rising tide will lift all canoes, Haida, BC, Canada, all Indigenous nations and people, hope in a future that recognizes the deeply rooted history of the Haida people, with thousands of years of experience in looking after Haida Gwaii and in interacting with Haida Gwaii and all the beings. Hope to learn from the mistakes of this colonial experience together, and to draw upon Haida culture and values to heal, to make things right, and take the best of what we all have to offer from our collective experience. Collective experiences as people, at a human level, collective experiences as government and collaborate and move forward in realizing this opportunity before us to design our coexistence based on this mutual respect and for healing of the people and the land. You know, it's very fitting that today, April 22nd, that this legislation is brought forward on Earth Day. As together we face the climate crisis, and we can only tackle this crisis working together. You know, wildfires, floods, sea level rise, ocean temperature raising, extreme weather events, seeing, the whales getting upset, their supernatural beings acting out. These supernatural forces are telling us now is the time for change before it is too late. And we can't wait. We can't wait to question, what little parts of the future look like, that there is faith. This is good faith, that there's a leap of faith that as people we can work together and figure these things out. And that now more than ever, our concerns and priorities are more aligned to better manage forests, to protect wild salmon, to manage land and sea ecosystems as one, to reduce carbon emissions, to combat systemic racism, and provide opportunities for families and communities to be self-sufficient and resilient in the face of this change and this crisis. And we can do this together. We could do this working together. And the way we've designed this agreement creates those conditions. I also want to, acknowledge when we're looking at this is a complex challenge that we've all had to face. Recognizing title, what does it look like going forward? Of course, there's a lot of unanswered questions. There's over 150 years of colonization. It's going to take time to undo, some of the harms, the things that aren't good. Look at the things that are good. And in our way, in trying to find answers for the future, we look back to the past. We look to our teachings, to our ancestors. And, one of the statements or teachings that guides us is a statement that was made by Chief Louis Collinson and was partially referenced, and it's really profound in what we're facing today. And he said, people are like trees and groups of people are like forests. While the forests are composed of many different kinds of trees, these trees intertwine their roots so strongly that it is impossible for the strongest winds that blow on our islands to uproot the forest. For each tree strengthens its neighbor, and their roots are inextricably entwined. In the same way, the people of our islands, composed of members of nations and races from all over the world, are beginning to intertwine their roots so strongly that no troubles will affect them. Just as one tree standing alone would soon be destroyed by the first strong wind which came along, so is it impossible for any person, any family, or any community to stand alone against the troubles of the world. And the reality is, we can't go back and alter history. We're all here to stay. We're all in this together. Our Haida roots run deep. Others are shallow. But with this bill, we could face the truth head on and instill hope that we can face the troubles of this world together based on respect and not fear, that we could heal our relationships with each other and the land and the waters, that we could change our behaviors as humans, change the systems that are harming this earth and each other, and hope have hope that as a result of our collective efforts, that these supernatural forces would take some pity on us. So I'd like to acknowledge this House. I'd like to acknowledge past leadership, Premier Campbell and his government for laying a foundation. And I'd really like to hold my hands up and acknowledge Premier Eby, Minister Rankin for their leadership, and this government for having the courage to move this work forward and uphold the honor of the Crown. So I'd encourage each and every one of you in this House to support this bill together as good people. That each and every one of you look deep within, examine your own history, your own relationship with colonization, with your heritage, with your culture, where you'd come from to British Columbia, to Canada, which now is your home. And what is your experience? Look deep within at that experience and, find that place, whether it was in Hong Kong or India or Ireland or wherever it was that you'd come from. There's something that need to be looked back on and find it within yourself to move forward unanimously together in passing this bill as good British Columbians, for the good of the province, as good Canadians, and in the spirit of this truth and reconciliation and hope, be part of making things right in this province and in this country. Kawa, thank you for listening.
Gaagwiis Jason, Alsop, President of the Council of Haida Nation. We are truly honored that you addressed this House today. Thank you so much for coming, and we are very honored to have all the guests here. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, final thoughts. We have seen for years, hundreds of years, in fact, since 1492, what the devastating effects of colonialism can be, and how it has affected the indigenous people of North America. And moreover, there are other places around the world that have had devastating effects due to the idea of colonialism. North America just happens to be one of those places. There are other places around the world that have pushed back against colonialism, some more successful than others. But the idea of moving along, conquering the land, and then raping the land of resources while suppressing the people who grew up on that land has had a devastating effect, and this may be some of what can be done to rectify some of that through recognition. So maybe it's something that maybe Canada might lead the world in showing recognition back to the people who were actually have ancestors dating back thousands of years to the land, and recognition of what that culture looked like and the achievements of those cultures could look like. So thank you for listening to us today. Here on Depictions Media Radio, you've been listening to Policy and Rates. Please find that subscribe button wherever it is so you can get more updates about how we are creating a more loving planet on this planet Earth. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.